let's say someone wants to take this frame of infinite games, but,
Okay.
but their thing isn't work. Like,
All right.
you have someone like Mother Teresa who's like, I just want to, right?
Dude.
Let's extrapolate this.
Yeah. So Alex, what if my goal isn't work? The goal is always work. It's just what you're working on. And so whether you're like, I want to have the best marriage, then cool, it takes fucking work. If the goal is to have the best kids, then parenting, is that not fucking work? It's fucking work. If the goal is to have the best physique, it's fucking work. If the goal is to have the best career, it's work. If the goal is to just be the ultimate version of you, it's work in all those arenas. And being mindful of what you want to optimize for in terms of how many hours you want to allocate to each. And so, like, most people live lives, I mean, I'm going to use Rogan's quote from somebody else, but of quiet desperation, because they're hoping to find a way around work. But work is the way. It's the only way. Because everything else, if it didn't require work, then you'd already have it. Breathing doesn't really require work. Most people do it. There's plenty of things that we just don't think about because we have them automatically. And so everything that you don't automatically have, you have to expend effort to get. And so everyone just wants a way to get things without working, which I understand, don't get me wrong. But the thing is that I remember, actually, this is a weird thought. So I remember when I was graduating college, I had this, it was like a $1 billion Powerball. Like it was like, you know, when it kind of goes over $1 billion. And I bought a Powerball ticket with my girlfriend, just as like a fun joke, not like I was like hoping to win. And what's weird is that I remember as the drawing was happening, I actually had this huge fear that I win. Because if I would win, then it would mean that I would never get a shot to prove myself. That I could have done it, because literally from that point on, if you win, nothing you do matters. Like, I could never prove that I had any metal whatsoever. Like, everyone would always say, it was because you won the fucking Powerball, dude. And I think the big reason that I didn't become a physician was because my dad has a successful practice, and I knew that if I became a physician, it didn't matter how good of a physician I was, it would always be because people would say it was because of him. Now, that was then. I cared a lot about what people think. I probably still do. Less so, but still on some degree. But that was, and so just to give, I guess, the audience an insight into like how I think about things, if it's valuable for you. Like, if you're afraid of winning the lottery because it won't give you a chance to prove to yourself who you want to be or who you want to become, then I think you're on the right path.
I love the inverse of that, which is that everything that's right now, which is hard, it's the opposite of the lottery, is the biggest fucking blessing. Yeah, and if we were to take this in the equal opposite perspective of, if winning the lottery is the ultimate way to not win, because you never get the opportunity to prove yourself, not necessarily prove to other people, but prove to yourself. And so, maybe said differently, the reason the Powerball terrified me is like, I wouldn't be able to prove to me, independent of what other people said, but like, I would never know if I could do it, because I had $1 billion behind me. And so every hardship that you encounter, if you reframe it as the story that you will someday tell to yourself of the person that you've become based on the dragons you've slain and the obstacles you've overcome, then I think that makes those obstacles a unique opportunity for self-improvement, because we can be grateful for these things. I think Jocko has a whole bit on this where whenever something bad happens, he says good. And I think it's a great trained response, because if something bad happens, my trained response isn't good, it's, I will tell the story someday. And so I think if you have that frame, then everything serves you. Because if something good happens, cool. If something bad happens, it'll be a story that I will someday tell. Because it assumes that you will live through it. And it assumes that you will eventually figure it out. And so, then you can't lose. As long as you don't quit. If you're cool talking about this, are these some of the conversations you have with your wiser self?
Yeah, I haven't actually had a ton of Solomon conversations recently, because I haven't had a lot of, because of the wonderful therapist that Solomon is, I don't have to stick to a schedule. And so I would say that like there are times, yeah, so there's a lot of research that suggests that we are better at giving advice than we are adhering to it. And so they've done, like, a simple example is they gave 2 whitewash scenarios of somebody and told the reader to give advice to the person who's in the whitewash scenarios. The thing is that the person in the whitewash scenarios was them, and they don't adhere to the advice that they give. And so they did this to just demonstrate that people, 1, don't listen to their own advice, and 2, that the advice that people give tends to be better than what they do. And they postulate that the reason for that is because you can be non-emotional and detached giving advice to somebody else. You can be more rational about the advice, whereas when you're in it, you have more emotions, you make less rational decisions. And so, extrapolating that out for me, I have a lot of relatively complex business dealings that happen on a regular basis. Most of my stressors, anxieties come from decisions that I have to make with incomplete information. And so if I were to have a therapist, I would probably spend a huge amount of time trying to catch them up on all the relative information. And then I would hope that they somehow have the business acumen to help me navigate these decisions, which they probably wouldn't. And then even if they did, I would have to hope that their incentive was aligned with mine, which theirs is billable hours, not me making them as money. And so there's just a lot of problems, I think, with the traditional model. And so, at least for me. And so I was like, okay, well, how can I get somebody who has completely aligned incentives, who has all the same information as me, who can give me good advice? And so the person who meets all of those qualifications is future me. And it's like, well, yeah, wouldn't it be nice to talk to that person? Well, what's interesting is if you switch your hat around and you're like, okay, I'm now future me, I'm going to give advice to younger me. It's a wild ride, but the dialogue is super powerful because you don't sugarcoat it for you, and you don't need to waste time prefacing and say like, hey, take this away. I mean, like, you don't have to get it. You just be like, it's such direct communication, and the advice that I would get is often advice that I give. And I give really good business advice. I only say that measured based on the company's growth that we have. And so taking that advice, oftentimes I too need to be more patient. Oftentimes I too need to keep doing what has been working. Oftentimes I too need to wait until we have enough data to make the next call. And I have to give time. And so now some therapists could say this to me and I'd be like, well, what the fuck do you know? How's your business going, right? Obviously not that well. You're talking to me for an hourly rate, whatever. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I'm just saying that their goals for business and their level of aptitude for business is probably not the same as mine. And so it'd be really hard for me to even put any weight on their opinion. But future me is much smarter and wiser than I am, of course. And so I do weigh their decisions. And so the other piece is that I don't have to have a generic, it's 60 minutes. Like, why does a therapy session need to be 60 minutes? It should be as long as it needs to be or as short as it needs to be to solve the problem. And so I've had times that it's been 7 minutes. I've had times when it's been 90. I've had times when it's 3 times in 1 week, and I've had times where I don't have to have a quote session with Solomon for a month. And so it's usually when I'm at big decision points where I have more frequent communication to try and like figure out an issue or problem. But once I'm kind of on a path, I usually stay on that groove for basically as long as I can. And so over the last 2 years, I had a lot more big directional decisions that I needed to make with kind of the media stuff that we do, and then also the investments in acquisition.com. But a lot of the early theses that we have enough data now that I could make decisions on them, and I have made decisions on them. And so now it's just about sticking to the plan.
So what did that process look like? You have a blank Google Doc and then you alternate line?
Yeah, I just literally pull up a Google Doc. I set a date so that I have all my conversations in one doc, and I just hit enter. So it's just me, him. He asks a question, I answer. And it sounds silly to do this, but do it once, and you'll realize that it's weird. It works.